absolutely. And one label that I wanted to discuss with you to get your thoughts on was impulse control, which is a term which is widely used in dog training, and I wonder whether we could maybe pull it apart a little bit. Is it maybe better to describe it as, rather than impulse control, stimulus control? Would that be a better way of viewing it?
Yeah, I hear Sarah Owens' influence in your
Sure,
question. Yeah,
sure, yeah,
and she does a great job of untangling that. So we've talked about so many things that are very complex balls of yarn, as we untangle them and unknot them and put the threads back together in a way that's useful. I agree that that's just a label. Uh, I don't know the extent to which genetic tendency, brain function, the cardiovascular or gut, and I mean, nowadays, people who study the gut, the intestinal system, the digestive system, have found that in a very real way, the intestinal system has its own brain. That is, it's not driven by this brain, even when this brain is dead. That system is making decisions and moving on its own. So, and there are neuronal cells there. And I mean, I think everybody needs to loosen their grip on what we think we know because it's changing fast, right? But anyway, so, if we did a necropsy on an animal, at this point, we would not be able to see in any of the other correlating systems to behavior impulse control. It's not a thing. It's a label, a concept for dogs that do something other than what we've cued or what we want, given the conditions we're in. That's the stimulus control part, given the conditions that we're in. So, for example, when we open the door, the dog rushes through, a door dasher. Look how many names we have for it, as though it's inside the dog in a fixed and immutable way. I have a dog dasher. We might say that dog is lacking impulse control. And that would give me a general idea that the dog is doing something under certain conditions that you're not happy with. That's what it means to me. And then I must say, what is the dog doing under what conditions? Well, the dog doesn't listen to me. Well, okay, so the dog doesn't respond to your requests, but we're missing the conditions. Under what conditions does the dog not listen to you? When I open the door and I say stay. Okay, now I've got a description, a behavior conditions unit I can work with. And so we can say, well, that cue, that stimulus is not controlling. I actually don't love the word control because I think that got Skinner into a lot of trouble right after the Second World War, talking about control. Of course, he meant it experimentally and scientifically, controlling variables like weather and so forth and so on. But in the popular world, control has, as it should, often very negative connotations. It certainly did for little Susie, right? For the kid in school who didn't want to be controlled. So I've decided to just try and influence that word a little bit. I would say stimulus influence, the influence of that antecedent cue over the behavior is very weak. And it tells me, perhaps I'm hypothesizing now, I try not to come in, white knuckling what I'm thinking. These are hypotheses, so I want to be loose. It may also mean that the reinforcers outside the door are stronger than the reinforcer for sitting at the door, which is the desired behavior, the behavior we want the dog to do. And then I ask myself, is this something I can influence? Is there a science and a technology in any place on the planet that can help me influence my goal behavior, that I have a dog that is patient at the door, thanks Gigi, rather than impulse controlled, right? All impulse control ever means is that there are reinforcers stronger for doing something else than there is for doing what we adults have asked of our learners. That's a behavior analysis of impulse control. So also from a behavior analysis point of view, impulse control is a lack of skill of doing a particular behavior in those conditions. That's what it means. So when I see the plane going by with the streamer impulse control, I see at the end of the streamer, that what that means is reinforcers are stronger for doing other behavior. And Kay Lawrence said it best. She simply said, I don't remember if I was visiting her, which was such a joy that I had that opportunity. She said, she showed me a video of a dog doing something she had asked, following a cue. And she said to me, so I didn't teach impulse control. I taught the dog to sit by my feet and wait for the cue to go after the ball.
Yeah.
Now, she would never identify herself as a behavior analyst, but these are natural principles. These describe the natural world. So you don't have to have particular training to observe and use them. When I teach the dog to stay when I open the door and wait until I say, go, go, have I changed his impulse control? Have I changed something in the impulse disorder? Or have I simply taught him that waiting produces equal or more valuable outcomes than door dashing? But of course, it takes skill to teach impulse control. It takes skill to teach each one of these behaviors of waiting until cued, given the dog's history of super reinforcers by going through the door. It takes skill and education and supervision and practice and failure and success to refine this training skill set. Isn't it easier to just say the dog has a problem?
So true, such a great example too. And I have another one that's very similar to that, is teaching impulse control for food, for the kind of traditional technique of teaching a dog to control their urges around a food reward in your hand. And what I tend to find is they're building potentially extinction and frustration into that process by withholding the food in the way they're doing it, and then labeling it and misinterpreting that as poor impulse control on the dog's part.
Yeah. Yeah.
So true, isn't it?
Say that again. I agree completely. And that's the problem with labels. So once you and I agree that what we want is a dog that isn't, jumping up, trying to snap. I think of sea lions because I have met many a sea lion that will bite a trainer's leg to get to that bucket of fish. It's a very common behavior problem, an unwanted behavior, an unsuccessful behavior problem. Let's call it that. A mistake. But let's be fearless. We can use any label we want because we'll never stop at just the label. We will always ask, what is the animal doing? Under what conditions? So call it Dumbledore. So teaching sea lions that there's benefit to staying on station rather than charging and biting my leg for food. And then we have to ask ourselves, how did that sea lion even learn that biting is related to getting the food reinforcer in the first place, right? So did they figure that out themselves because we didn't start to train the animal soon enough? Or, where should the responsibility lie? And I was talking to Christina Allagood, who teaches a research, we call it consuming, a beginner's research reading course for Behavior Works now. And she said to me yesterday that a behavior analytic viewpoint, that philosophy, that worldview, is characterized by no blame to the learner and only help from the teacher. So our science helps us not have a need for blame. Our job is to assess what's going on. What are the signals? What are the reinforcers? And then teach to that, build repertoires. And I thought that was so fabulous